Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into an 80-year-old geopolitical thriller, one centered around a single island that could literally trigger World War III. We're talking secret flights, nuclear brinkmanship, and a massive diplomatic tightrope act that basically shaped the modern world as we know it. Let's get right into it.
So why might the next global nuclear conflict start over one single Asian island? It's a terrifying thought, right? But to really grasp the massive modern-day stakes of a potential World War III, we've got to connect the dots of the incredibly convoluted history of US-China relations. It's like a giant puzzle, and it all starts with how we got here.
All right, to see how all this builds, let's rewind to the late 1940s. China was in the middle of a brutal civil war. By 1949, the defeated Republic of China government, along with over 1 million loyalists, retreated across the strait to Taiwan. Now remember, this island had just been freed from 50 years of Japanese control. What's wild here is the initial US reaction. In early 1950, the US basically ignored them. They literally drew up a defense perimeter map and totally left Taiwan off of it, kind of leaving them to fend for themselves against Mao Zedong's new communist mainland government. But then, the summer of 1950 hits and the Korean War breaks out. Suddenly, communism is spreading and the American military rushes right back in.
Now, how do you suddenly justify sending a massive naval fleet to protect an island you literally just wrote off? Well, President Harry Truman got creative. He found a legal loophole. He declared Taiwan's status as officially undetermined. His logic was, since Japan had surrendered it but no official treaty had actually assigned its sovereignty yet, it wasn't officially part of any country. This exact hyper-specific phrasing birthed what we call strategic ambiguity. It gave the US a way to militarily shield the island from communism without ever declaring it a fully independent nation.
But as you can probably guess, this ambiguity fast-tracked a terrifying military escalation. Welcome to the intense brinkmanship of the 1950s. First off, Congress gives the US president full authorization to defend Taiwan, even green-lighting nuclear weapons on the island. Mao responds by unleashing tens of thousands of artillery rounds on ROC-controlled islands right off the coast. And here's where things get genuinely chilling. US military planners literally drew up plans to drop nukes on the newly formed People's Republic of China. They crunched the numbers and estimated up to 1 million casualties if they actually pushed the button.
Right as everyone is staring down the barrel of total annihilation, a warning comes through. Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev shoots a direct telegram over to the US, explicitly stating that an attack on China would be treated as an attack on the Soviet Union, meaning World War III, with nukes. That immense heavy dose of reality forced everyone to step back from the absolute brink. The US kept its troops and nukes on standby, but the direct clash was put on pause.
What followed, though, is honestly one of the most bizarre standoffs in history, and it lasted 21 years. For 2 decades, both sides swapped artillery shells across the strait on a daily basis. But get this, it was exclusively non-lethal targeting. They're firing shells every single day, intentionally not hitting anything valuable, just to keep up this baseline tension. It was basically a daily reminder that the Civil War was absolutely not over, a completely surreal, perfectly choreographed rhythm of hostility. Okay, transitioning into the 60s and 70s, the whole map starts to shift again. The US actually parks nuclear weapons on Taiwan in 1960. 4 years later, with Soviet help, the PRC gets their own nukes. But then, a massive fracture happens. Mao and the Soviets have a violent ideological falling out, which even leads to border clashes in the late 60s. President Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger see this huge crack in the global communist alliance and decide to play the China card. This leads to 1971, when Kissinger literally fakes a stomachache in Pakistan so he can secretly fly into Beijing. During those highly classified talks, Kissinger sits down with Mao's right-hand man, Prime Minister Zhou Enlai. And Zhou doesn't mince words. He says, "This is the crux. Nothing can happen unless we agree to that." He was talking about Taiwan. To get Beijing on their side against the Soviets, the US essentially had to agree that Taiwan was part of China. Kissinger, eager to widen that communist fracture, went along with the premise, tactfully suggesting that political evolution would eventually just swing in the PRC's favor anyway. So, we enter this era defined by just massive diplomatic doublespeak, a foundational hypocrisy. Publicly, US policy sticks to Truman's old line. Taiwan's status is officially undetermined. But privately, declassified transcripts show President Nixon explicitly acknowledging to Chinese leaders that Taiwan is a part of China. This wild contrast between public posturing and private concession, that is the exact irony that still forms the bedrock of US-China relations today. And the fallout for Taiwan was absolutely brutal.
By the late 1970s, under President Jimmy Carter, the island got massive diplomatic whiplash. The US officially recognizes the PRC as the only China. They moved their embassy straight from Taipei to Beijing. They completely erased their mutual defense treaty with Taiwan, and every single US soldier and nuclear weapon is pulled off the island. I mean, overnight, Taiwan goes from a core American ally against communism to an abandoned diplomatic orphan on the world stage.
Well, US Congress felt incredibly uneasy about just hanging a former ally out to dry like that. So they passed the Taiwan Relations Act. And the details here are absolutely crucial. It legally required the US to sell defensive weapons to Taiwan and maintain the military capacity to rescue the island. But, and this is a massive but, it intentionally stopped short of actually promising to intervene. They legally mandated arming the island, effectively locking the US into this super precarious will they, won't they stance. It was just more strategic ambiguity, designed to keep China from attacking, but also keep Taiwan from declaring independence. Let's fast forward a bit to 1996. Taiwan holds its very first democratic presidential election, and they pull off an astounding 76% voter turnout. And keep in mind, Beijing was actively trying to bully them out of democracy. They had amassed 100,000 troops across the strait and were literally firing ballistic missiles that landed just 20 miles from the island. But the Taiwanese people still turned out in droves. The US responds by sending 2 aircraft carrier strike groups to the region, and just like that, Taiwan's miraculous shift from a military dictatorship to a flourishing, defiant democracy had officially taken root. But Taiwan realized something critical. The US still viewed them as strategically disposable if global priorities ever shifted again. So they engineered a brilliant survival strategy. They built what's now called the Silicon Shield. The government heavily subsidized companies to become the absolute best in the world at manufacturing semiconductors, those incredibly valuable little silicon chips. We're talking the literal brains inside your smartphone, your laptop, the car you drive. They made themselves economically indispensable, knowing that controlling this tech would give the US a massive incentive to protect them from Beijing.
Just look at these numbers. It's staggering. Taiwan manufactures 90% of the world's most advanced microchips. 90. The rest of the entire planet combined is sitting at just 10%. They successfully monopolize the core hardware of the modern global economy. Major tech companies literally cannot function without them. By intertwining their fate with global tech, Taiwan effectively forced the US, and everyone else for that matter, to care deeply about their defense.
So that brings us to the multi-trillion-dollar question. If push comes to shove, would the United States actually come to their rescue today? It's the question that perfectly bridges 80 years of historical diplomacy right into modern economic reality. The US is still using that exact same policy of strategic ambiguity to keep everyone guessing. They won't say yes, they won't say no, they just try to keep things stable by making the consequences of an invasion totally unpredictable for Beijing. But here's the thing, the pressure from Beijing is only escalating. Under President Xi Jinping, China has built up a world-class military, and they've made the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation a core, non-negotiable priority, which absolutely includes Taiwan. Back in 2005, Beijing actually passed the anti-secession law. This explicitly mandates pursuing unification with Taiwan and officially reserves the right to use non-peaceful means if Taiwan ever pursues formal independence. So the threat of a violent reunification, it is literally written into their law.
Yet, despite all those threats, and despite all the economic incentives mainland China offers, there is a very stark reality on the ground. Today, only about 12% of the island's 23 million people actually favor any kind of reunification with the mainland. Decades of democratic development and separation have created a population that identifies less and less with the authoritarian giant right next door.
So, what does this all mean for us today? It means we're staring at an explosive modern flashpoint. The US and China are locked in a renewed, intense great power rivalry. You have China regularly running invasion drills and blocking airspace to flex its military muscle. In response, the US is actively resurrecting its Asian island defense chain, and caught right in the absolute middle of all this is Taiwan, wielding its massive tech dominance and leaning on 75 years of diplomatic ambiguity as its main psychological shield.
Which leaves us with one final, deeply provocative question to ponder. Will this 80-year-old diplomatic tightrope of strategic ambiguity actually keep the peace indefinitely? Or is this precarious, totally unpredictable stance the exact thing that guarantees a catastrophic global collision? It's a terrifying dynamic, for sure, but one that's undeniably going to shape the entire future of our global order. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Until next time, keep questioning and keep learning.